Hello and welcome. Tonight, before we get started, before we start talking about all of the various questions that I get asked during the course of the week, I want you to think as a parent. Before we talk about college scholarships, before we talk about college recruiting, before we talk about travel baseball, I want to ask every parent that finds their way to this video tonight a one basic question. What was it about sports that you signed your child up for? I'm bringing this up because this week, my youngest son officially retired from baseball at 33 years old. And I was out there in Iowa for Father's Day weekend, and I got to play catch with Tyler. And it ended up being the last weekend of his playing. And it got me to thinking. You know, I get a lot of questions every week. And I want you to just stop and just think, what was it about sports that made you sign your child up for youth athletics? And I would venture to guess that many of us had very simple hopes. Obviously, I hope we all wanted our children to have fun. We all wanted our children to interact with their friends in their peer groups. We wanted them to learn how to compete. We wanted to maybe teach them some life lessons about falling or failing or struggling and perseverance. Oftentimes, we think about success and how do families measure athletic success? The teams that they play on, the all-star teams, the validation. But is that really why young athletes truly begin to participate? Oftentimes, we as parents are so worried about making mistakes, we absolutely lose sight of the real purpose and the real goal with regard to our children and the path that they ultimately take. Somehow, sports gets thrown into this chaotic world of decisions, and we always wonder if the mistakes we're making as parents, where are we making them? And I always let parents know, oftentimes, some of the biggest mistakes that I have made were really stemming from losing focus on, 3 to 5 key points. And I'm going to cover them tonight. And I want you to understand that just this week, just kind of giving some reflection on being a dad. Now, both my boys now are 35 and 33. My youngest being Tyler, my oldest being Kyle. And I often look back at photos and videos, and I really, especially during Father's Day, that's a big time for me personally. And I always go back and remember moments from pictures, faces. And sometimes when I get all of these questions, and boy, oh boy, this past week, I received 5 times, 10 times the normal amount of emails. Obviously, much of it to do with the 5 and 5 and some of the recent legislation, college recruiting, transfer portal. But, after going out to Des Moines, Iowa, which was a beautiful city, by the way, if you ever get a chance to go, I really wanted to stop and really think. As I was playing catch with Tyler, something I have done thousands and thousands and thousands of times, I felt in my heart that this was going to be the final time, not just as father and son. I'm sure we'll continue to play catch, but with him in a uniform, playing organized affiliated baseball. I've played catch with Tyler at Fenway. I've played catch with Tyler at Oracle. I've played catch with Tyler at Vanderbilt, all over. And each time I never lose sight of, that's my little boy. Yes, he's a man, but stubbornly, I always see my little boy. And I watch parents now that struggle. And I have parents that ask me about 2031s and 2032s. And it makes me really stop. And it makes me want to think, what are parents struggling? Where are they making mistakes? And I want them to really begin to understand sports is about learning hard work. Sports is about making friends. It's going to help your student athletes build character. You know, we as parents get bombarded with what I call predatorial advice, lessons, travel baseball, you know, at these younger ages, rankings at 6 through 8, you know, and then as they get older, oh, you need showcases, you need to go to camps, and all of these decisions that parents feel like they have to make. Well, your son or daughter didn't make Little League All-Stars. Okay, we got to make a decision. We got to fix something. There's something must be wrong. Something has to be fixed. But I really want you to understand that, you know, all of these decisions really begin at the dinner table when your children are very young. But the purpose of tonight is not to say to you as a parent, wherever you are within your process, however, whatever the age, whatever the grade, we're going to start from ground zero. And we're going to basically cover 5 topics. And I wrote these down on the flight back because each one of these had a purpose for me. And the first one I want to discuss with you as parents, and again, this is a live discussion, so if you have a question, I want you to ask. And one of the first questions, and why I put my glasses on here now, is, and I want to cover this out of the gate because I think it's important. I get parents that will say to me, you know, I answer a lot of questions. It's just who I am. It's what I do. I answer a lot of questions. But I'll get questions from parents about, how can you help me? And so, quite simply, I always try to let people know I have been in this space for over 38 years. And what that qualifies me to do is to speak educatedly on the most important topic that I think we all miss, which is the view from the parental top of the mountain. And I don't say that in a braggart capacity. I say that because when I was a dad and my children were 5 and 3 and I was a single father, I never once said, okay, every decision I make is going to be geared towards one of my sons or both of my sons becoming professional athletes. That wasn't it. And so what I do is, I've written books. I talk to coaches. I talk to athletes. I talk to people within the sporting world, particularly baseball, but I also talk softball. I talk basketball. I work with several basketball players, lacrosse, but most of all, Coach Beede, Walter Beede. This is what I do. I listen, and then I try to help parents find solutions. And if I can be an active participant with regard to the solution, I will let families know. I work for solutions with college coaches. Sometimes college coaches are looking for new opportunities. Sometimes college coaches are looking for student athletes to fill roster spots. Sometimes college coaches are looking for is this young man going to be drafted? Is he going to stay? I work with college coaches. I work with families. I work within the industry. And where I think that allows parents to have a distinct advantage is that I can provide access where most others cannot. And I do so in such a way where I have no skin in the game. I just had a parent before we came on looking for a mental performance coach. I can plug those people into Brett McCabe, Tamara Seaman, Danielle Martin. I've had parents ask me about strength coaches. I can plug them into Tommy Moffitt, Ben Fairchild, Eric Cressy. Nutrition, Jeremy Fouts, the mobility chick. In other words, I like to consider myself a point person, a general contractor, so to speak, for families and student athletes that are seeking solutions to problems that they may be having. And so that's why I've changed my website, coachbeede.com. I changed that because I feel like sometimes we get too overloaded with recruiting in the older athletes that we don't spend enough time with the younger athletes. And the younger athletes and the parents seem to be really afraid of not making the right decisions at the right time. And so that is where all of this came from. And so I thought tonight I would begin there. And Colin, hello, hello, hello. And so, most parents, the first decision is, what is success supposed to really look like? The biggest myth is it's about winning and scholarships and Division One, and it's everything that leads up to that. Exposure opportunities, the travel teams, the national travel teams, all of these things. That's the myth that we live under for most parents and most athletes. They feel that the only way to have success is to be out in front of it early. Meaning, I got to play for the best teams. I got to try out for the best teams. I got to get the best gear. I got to have the best instructors. And you are sold services based on that fear and that mindset. Well, the truth of the matter is that really, and I say this with all due respect, and I see all the questions coming in. If the priority for you as a parent is not that sports will make your child a better person, a better adult, we're off to a rocky start. Because the myth is that 9 out of 10 are never going to play Division I sports. In fact, the vast majority of youth athletes will never play in college. So the whole big decision that you want to make as a family at the earlier ages is, what is the goal? It should be something along the lines that you want your child to become a better person, a better prepared adult. Because in the real world, everything that happens, we're dealing with highs and lows, ebbs and flows, ups and downs, disappointment, things that don't happen on the timelines that we want them to. And we have to have some sort of resolve and stick-to-itiveness. And that's what sports should really be about. That's what it was about when I was a parent. I looked at sports from my vantage point when I was a student athlete. And athletics for me taught me perseverance. It taught me about showing up. Showing up. I went from really, really bad to being able to achieve things that others that were much better than me when I was very young, they couldn't believe that I had achieved that. So what's the message there? The message is persistency leads to consistency, which leads to, being able to achieve by stacking days. not chasing trophies, not chasing stature. And when I'm working with parents, especially of the younger ages, I will always emphasize. I think back to families of student athletes that I'm working with when they were 11 years old and who they are today as 16-year-olders. I have a family in Mississippi, and they really went out on a limb because a lot of people were saying, "Oh, your 13-year-old should not be playing any travel athletics against 14 or 15-year-olders. They might get hurt." And guess what? The student athlete, the young man, is having the time of his life. And, mom and dad had some trepidation, but guess what? The young man is loving it. And so, my point for point one is the clear goal for athletics should have nothing to do with achieving a certain level of college athletics. It should have nothing to do with college athletics. It should have nothing to do with stature, all stars. I never made an all star team until I was 15. Yeah, and I can tell you many times being tremendously disappointed. Middle school, junior high, we called it junior high. I know we don't call it that way anymore, but junior high school, I was cut twice. So my point to you is that should be your first decision that you're making as a family, no matter where you are in your process. Really, what is the goal? What is the goal with athletics? And as you get into high school, your decisions get a little bit bigger. There's a little bit more urgency. There's a little bit more of a challenge, and I understand that. Okay, I see all of them lining up. Now, number two, should we chase opportunities or protect childhood? Travel baseball, private lessons, gear, gurus, year-round competition. I get this all the time. Every single week, I am getting questions about, well, there's tryouts for the 2027. 2027? It's 2026. We're having tryouts already? It's June. It's going to be July tomorrow. But we're worried about tryouts, and we're chasing exposure, and we're chasing showcases, we're chasing. And this is where a lot of bad decisions get made, because really nothing can be done between the ages of, say, 8 through 17 that really are going to impact where your student athlete goes to college or what level they end up playing, if the decisions that you've been making are predicated on chasing. Because if you didn't somewhere along the line begin to choose a path for your child and student athlete, and all you're doing is bouncing from chase to chase. This instructor's no good. That travel team's no good. This team doesn't have that. That does, the equipment stinks there. You're going to end up with heartache and disappointment. And that really is where a lot of parents really are falling behind. And the reason for that is more is not always better. And, when I say that, parents will always say to me, well, if we don't play in the fall, we won't get to play in the spring. And our high school coach also owns the travel team. So if we don't play for the travel team, we won't get play in the high school team. The best development is when challenging moments intersect with passion for participation. Now, a lot of people get bored with this, and I try to say to them, let me just tell you right out of the gate, if at every step along the way, your student athlete, regardless of sport, doesn't have a passion for it, then the competition eventually just gets to a point where they just say, I'm out. I'm going to tap out. And when you're chasing all of these moves, instead of choosing and creating a plan where you're family and student athlete can take action steps, it's going to break down. It's like trying to drive a car 100 miles an hour through the desert with no oil in the engine. All right, you might get out there maybe 100 miles, but at some point it's going to break down. So you can go faster and you can just think and hope, or you can create a plan. And if you have a plan, you're going to end up in a much better place. So the myth that more is better is just that, it's a myth. And oftentimes, again, the predatorial sales technique is going to attack based on your fear and lack of understanding as to the realities of what's going on. And I need parents to understand that. And yes, I'm going to answer that in 1 second, Michael. I will get to that in 1 second. Don't sacrifice your student athletes' passion and love for the game and miss a real opportunity for development. In other words, don't chase hype and sacrifice development. And what do I mean by that? There has to be a time for rest, recovery, and replenishment. And when I say that, parents always think you're talking about weightlifting. No, I'm talking about mental break. Let them go fishing. Let them go on a canoe. Let them go to the beach. Let them go to the lake. Let them do something. Let your children be children while they are children. Novel fact, but that is imperative. And I'll often say to parents, less can be much more valuable than pushing the gas pedal for more. If you lay off the gas pedal and they become more passionate, guess who's pushing the gas pedal? Your children. And you can steer, but you don't have to. It's kind of like Racer X and Speed Racer. The children with the passion, they begin to press the gas pedal and you just navigate. Number 3, what happens when confidence disappears? Meaning every athlete is going to struggle. And I often will have parents that will immediately think it's somebody's fault. And I will always say to them, it's inevitable. Now, some parents, they never deal with this till they get to the varsity level of high school. And in some cases, they don't get to it until they're in college. The latter was my situation with my youngest son. My youngest son really didn't struggle too much in any sport that he participated in until he got to his freshman year in college. And boy, oh boy, was there some struggle. But the bright light and the silver lining was that my son was very resilient. He didn't roll over. My thing when I'm talking to parents is about when your student athlete's confidence begins to waver. That is where you need to begin to listen and watch the body language. Because I promise you, as parents, failure is coming. We can't predict it. We can't predict an error on a ground ball to your student athlete who's playing shortstop. The bases loaded, 2 outs, a routine ground ball, and all he had to do was flip it to second base for the 3rd out, and the team would have won. But instead, the ball bounced over his glove, and the winning run scored from second base. That's a shot across the bow. How do you handle that as parents? Because ultimately, that is the key. The key. Anybody can sail a boat on crystal calm waters. Try doing it during a storm when it's thunder and lightning and it's pouring and the winds are gusting. That's what your student athlete feels when they strike out with the bases loaded. Or they give up a home run in a big situation, or they miss a free throw that would have tied a game and sent it to overtime, or fumbled the football. Navigating the ship, parents, you're the captain of the cruise ship. You have to steer the vessel, both in good times and in tough times. And looking back, some of the mistakes I made was being too much of a coach and not enough dad. I could never take my coaching half. When I was a competitor, when I was a player and a coach, my competitive mode was a 10. It never went to 9.2. It never went to 8.4. It was 10. And I brought that level of intensity because that's the world that I grew up in. My world in my younger days was ultra competitive. And in today's world, it's not so competitive at the younger levels. And when I was a dad, I lost sight of I'm not the competitor anymore. I'm not the coach. I'm dad. And it took me many years of falling short to figure out, and a light bulb went on when my oldest son said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not one of your players." Dawn over Marblehead, the light goes off. So my point to you as parents is what you want to make sure that you're doing is confidence comes from learning. Confidence comes from falling. Confidence comes from understanding that that moment is not permanent. You must understand that anything that happens in sport, good or bad, is not permanent. Success is not always permanent. Failure, falling, not always permanent. Every 0 for 4 means somewhere along the lines, if you're a 300 hitter, somewhere along the lines is going to come a 3 for 6. And now you're 3 for 10 and you're hitting 300. Now the 0 for 4 doesn't look as bad because you're 3 for 10. In other words, you must have balance. As parents, recognize the body language, the emotions, the disappointment. Deep breath. And this was my favorite line that my dad would say to me so many times. Captain, time heals all wounds. Well, I'm not cut. What are you talking about? I don't have a wound. And he would look at me and he would say, listen to what I just said. You lost today. That doesn't mean you're going to lose tomorrow. Meaning you struggled today. That doesn't mean you're going to struggle tomorrow. You have a decision to make. Pick yourself up. Move forward. Show up. The results, they are not something that can be scripted. All right, let's check in with Colin. Good evening, Trevor. Hello, Gene. Hola, Walter. My son is going to his senior year, and his high school varsity coach just took another higher level high school job after having an epic season. We have realized how all baseball is business. Gene, right on cue. That point number 3 about handling disappointment and poise and composure. Both my boys on the visors, and I have a picture of it, and I'll put it on this video. I used to have them write poise and composure. And when everything started to get unsettled around them, I would have them take their hats off, look in there, take a deep breath, let it all go, and just poise and composure. Youth athletics is a one big mega business, and there are lots of people pulling the strings. But you, as parents, are the CEOs. You are the chief executive officers of your children until they reach 21 or whenever mom and dad give up the strings. And you need to be the CEO and the COO, and you need to be the person in charge, and you need to be the one navigating the ship, the personality of the ship, the emotion of the ship, the direction of the ship. It's one big business. It's never anything personal, never anything personal. It's just business because we have let youth athletics become the business. And the whole purpose of Coach Beede is to be a voice, an alternative voice, because having lived through so many topics in real life situations as a 63-year-old adult. I can offer parents some insight as to what it looks like and what a few solutions might be. Or if I don't have that information, I can point you in the direction to someone who probably will be able to have the answer. Number 4, who should own the journey? Now, this is a big thing for me. And when I was writing this down on the plane, um, it goes back to number 3 when I say you're the CEO. Who owns the journey? This is an extremely big dilemma for parents because I often get somebody will run into a coach that will give them an ultimatum, meaning the football coach is telling you if you play baseball in the fall, if you play baseball during our summer 7-on-7s, forget about coming out in the fall. In other words, there's so many people that think they're the captain of your cruise ship for your child. And somewhere along the line, that the lines have been blurred. And I want to kind of bring some perspective to this. There is not one coach, not one, that should have the ability to dictate and determine how your child spends their childhood. Now, let me preface that by saying if you're playing on a team sport, this used to happen every year in baseball. And parents in high school level would say to me, well, we have vacation plans in April. Well, that's silly. You have a high school senior season. I'm not talking about that narrative. I'm talking about it's baseball season, it's summertime, and a football coach or a soccer coach or a lacrosse coach is telling you as a parent, well, you can't play. You got to make a decision here because if you keep playing baseball, you're not going to be able to play football. Conversely, a football coach may say something to you about lifting versus playing baseball or something along those lines. We've all run into this dilemma. Or we have a high school coach or a travel coach that says you shouldn't play for you shouldn't go practice with your high school team, or your high school coach is losing players to a travel. Timeout. Parents, you are the captain. You are the CEO. You are the chief operating officer. You are the chief executive officer of your children. Take control back. Please don't go down the lines. Well, this instructor told us we should do this. This travel coach told us we should do that. The high school coach told us here. Whoa. I used to always say to coaches that tried this with my children, particularly soccer coaches, I'm not going to throw soccer coaches under the bus, but I was a baseball guy. Everybody knew that. But my sons played football. They played hockey. They played basketball. And yes, they played soccer. But I had a youth soccer coach say to my oldest son, well, if you're not playing fall soccer, if you're not playing spring soccer, he won't be able to play in the fall. And my son came home and he was all upset. And my son was 8 at the time. And I was like, wow, whoa, what's wrong? Well, Coach X told me that if I didn't play spring soccer, I wouldn't be able to play in the fall. I went to the coach and I said, here's a novel idea, and I would love for you just to keep it. If you don't feel that my son is qualified to play on your team in the fall, that's fine. I have no problem with that. You're the coach and you make that decision. But my sons play baseball in the spring. We're from New England. And that's just kind of something that I feel strongly about. He will not be playing youth soccer and youth baseball. And then as my boys got older, it was youth basketball, AAU basketball. Well, basketball season around my part of the country ends in like mid to late February. And then it's baseball season. Well, AAU basketball started in the spring and went into the early summer. And there were all these trips. And I had to say to the AAU basketball coach, I'm sorry, but my boys play baseball right now. So all of this struggle, parents, step up, be the CEO, be the COO, be the captain of your child's childhood. Every year, an athlete should carry a little bit more responsibility than the year before, meaning the goal should be over the course of your child's childhood, they should begin to take more accountability into their pathway. Now, I'm not suggesting this for 6 through 12-year-olds, nor am I really suggesting this 6 through 14, but at 14, all right, we're starting to take shape. And that's at the time where things really people need to put their foot down. You can't try to play 3 sports simultaneously. Okay, I'm going to answer this question because I've seen it now for the third time. Walter, what is the choice between all of the sports blending in? You keep preaching spending time working out. Okay, I'm going to cover this now. Parents, here's the deal. When your children become 13 or 14, obviously you as a family or your child has discovered a certain love for maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 sports. But at some point you must make an executive decision where you say there needs to be a nutrition, a strength plan implemented, because at some point your children, in order to grow both mentally and physically, need rest, recovery, and replenishment. You need to tape those 3 words to the refrigerator. And so at some point, we can't just have one continuous 12-month, cycle of sports and practices and lessons and tournaments and games and instruction and camps and showcases. Oh my. We got to call a timeout. We got to start talking about sleep. We got to check in with, how is the mindset? How's the body language? Is there any irritability? Is there any irritation? Are they eating properly? Are they hydrating properly? We don't even talk about strength really. More and more college coaches, and this is a fact, are pulling the reins in and saying, "Oh, over the summer, rather than you going and playing, we'd rather have you get into the weight room and get stronger and recover and grow and mature." A lot of times we're trying to ask 10 through 17-year-olders to do things that 18 to 25-year-olders are doing, and their bodies simply are not prepared to handle that workload. And someone has to step up and say, nope, we don't need to be chasing more tournaments and more showcases and more events and more lessons. We have to have some time off. My son's baseball, they put it down every August 1st. They did not pick baseball back up until late December, early January. And during basketball, it was really more towards the strength. And they got those 3 months of strength training. And here's another novel concept. You can lift weights. You can strength train in season. If somebody's telling you and your athletes at 14 through 21 that they need to go into in-season mode and there's no strength training, that's a big fabrication. That is a no-no. Again, please be the CEO of your children's future. Who do you hope your child becomes? This is the heart of everything that I hear from parents. I ask parents, when your child is 25 years old, and I assume, although in today's world, some days I don't know that, but who do you hope your child becomes? Now, my children now are 35 and 33. What do you hope people say about them? I don't think you're going to be worried about, did they hit 400? Did they strike out 20 in a game? Nobody's going to think back at the 25-year-old and say, boy, that time I remember you hit 40 years old. No, they're going to remember what kind of person was your child, your son or your daughter. I get people all the time will say, man, we ran into Tyler on the road and he was polite. He was well-mannered. He was gracious with his time. He was respectful. You should be proud. You're darn tootin' I'm proud. both my boys. I used to hear all the time, every time I speak with your son, he looks at me in the eye, shakes my hand, always says, "Thank you, Mr. Backlund. Thank you, Mr. McGurk. Thank you, Mr. Scanlon." That is who I'm most proud of, who my children became, who my sons became. And that is the emphasis of when it all begins. So no matter where you are in this whole process, no matter how old your child or your student athlete is, you got to think about these 5 discussion points, and you got to ask yourself, what's the priority? What is the emphasis going to be? You want your children to become confident adults, to have a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. They can't live and die on every good event and bad event that happens in their life. Life is brutally hard. Life is brutally hard. Everything that we've talked about tonight, it must lead back to one simple question. And that is, will this help my child become the best version of themselves? Will this help put my child, my student athlete, on the right path? We have become overloaded that youth sports somehow has become a priority instead of a participation portion of childhood. Suddenly, our lives are dictated, and our vacations are dictated based on schedules. And in some cases, parents view this as more of a social activity. But at the end of the day, the numbers are just staggering. The billions of dollars that are spent, and even more are being spent each and every year. And by 2030, I was speaking with a company, an organization. They predict it's going to be almost double what it is today. Youth sports simply plays a role, and it helps create a foundation for your child and who they become as an adult, who they become as a spouse, who they become as a parent and a member of community. It is nothing about, my sons have trophies and medals and awards, that date back to free throw contests when they were very, very young. And today they collect dust. But when I look at those medals and certificates and trophies, I think back to the faces of my sons, them in the car after going to friendlies and getting a fribble, after maybe going over a friend's house after a game, after a pup won a football game. I can't get those days back, and neither can you. So don't give them away. Don't be in a hurry to give those moments away. I want to say thank you to everybody that continues to send me such phenomenal questions. I mean, if I could show you the amount of questions I received this week, it was mind-boggling to me. And I want you to understand that this is more about raising children through the benefits and the gifts of youth athletics. It's not about the stature. And I'm going to end on this. This book over my shoulder here, I wrote about my dad. And I want to just say to you how this ties all together. Is my dad said to me one day, and I was in the Boy Scouts, and I was trying to be an Eagle Scout. And one day I was so frustrated trying to earn a certain merit badge when I was like 13 or 14. And he looked at me, and I was crumbling up papers and throwing them on the ground. And he looked at me and he said, "Captain, what's the problem?" And I said, "I'm trying to get this merit badge. I can't figure this stuff out." He's like, "Hey, the merit badge isn't about what you put on a sash and show people. Nobody's going to be impressed by something you're putting a merit badge on your chest. They're going to be impressed when the topic that you're learning about helps somebody in life, whether it's first aid, whether it's, mapping or, camping or, you learn to help people later on in life. And that is the actual badge. It's not the thing that's going to hang on a sash or hang on a wall or on a trophy case. And that's the message I want to leave you with as parents. Don't worry about the validation. Don't worry about the achievements, because with every achievement, there's going to be a disappointment. And ultimately, they all begin to balance out. And where you are today as an 8-year-old is not going to have any impact on who you become unless you just stack days one at a time in silence and you keep showing up. And then at the end of the day, who you become at 25 is all that's ever going to matter. So I want to say thank you to everybody. I want to end this tonight because I don't want it to go too long. I want to let everybody know, CoachBeede.com. There's so many things there. First of all, so much information. I just give it away. I have newsletters. I have courses. I have all kinds of stuff that I just give away. I also have books. Now, people don't want to read anymore, but I have worksheets in the books. I have PDF files in the books. I have the recruiting process. I have the process. I have fun over fear. I mean, I have so many books that offer information for parents to utilize, and they're all up to date. They're all up to date as of 2026. There's nothing in those books that's old and antiquated, but it's free information. You can literally go and I some of the stuff I give the books away, but parents still don't want to take the time. But if you need help, you're frustrated, you're overwhelmed, you feel like you're underinformed, I can tell you parents I've worked with younger children and all the way through college. I can tell you parents that are just finding their way to me today, and they're in the transfer portal. And I've helped them find new homes. So my point to you is, if I can help, I'll do the best I can. I would love for you on the way out to engage with this video tonight. I would love for you to hit the thumbs up. I would love for you to leave a comment, leave a question, engage with the video, share the video with others, share the community with others. By sharing, we'll grow the community. And ultimately, my hope is that between Baseball Blue Book and Coach Beede, together, we are going to become the alternative voice for all those that are frustrated within youth athletics. Trevor, thank you very much. Scott, as always, thank you so very, very much. And Gene, I want to say thank you. Colin, say thank you. Michael, thank you. I want to say thank you to everybody. Have a great week. It's the 4th of July. It's the 250th anniversary. I remember being a Boy Scout in Concord, Mass. in 1976. Yes, sirree, the bicentennial. President Gerald Ford. That makes me very old. And we were camping, and we did the Lexington Concord walk. And I remember thinking, 200 years, wow, that is old. And here I am, 50 years later, 50 years later, and the gray hair to prove it. And I can just tell you, I hope you all take the time to have a great holiday vacation. I hope you have a great week in youth athletics. And I hope this video made sense no matter when you're watching it. Have a great week.